On a Friday evening in September 2022, after a long week of work, James, a Netflix employee, and his buddy Daniel decided to have a few drinks after work at the new exciting pub that had just opened off Hollywood Boulevard, California, USA. The last few years had not been kind to James. Born in Michigan, he moved to Florida, attended Full Sail University. After graduating, he went on to Georgia, where he worked for Netflix. By 2020, he was ready to make the big leap and move to Hollywood. He made all the arrangements and eventually arrived in California. A few days after landing, the first COVID lockdowns were in effect. The job he had lined up fell through, and it took him 8 months until he could eventually find decent work. He fell in love and had a terrible breakup. But by September 2022, things had started picking up for him. He was living on a houseboat in Long Beach, had a good job at Netflix again. So on this night, he was in a really great mood for celebrating. After spending some time drinking at the bar on the second floor, James and Daniel decided to go upstairs to a club on the third floor where they were playing deep house music and carry on having a good time. After a while, Daniel told James he was going back down to the bar for a bit. As James happily waved his friend away, a small young man approached with large brown curls. He asked James if he would like a drink. At first, James thought it was weird, brushing the weirdness away by reasoning,
"It's probably just an awkward kid trying to find his way."
He followed the young man up to the fourth floor, a quieter, chill area. The young man introduced himself as Mark, purchased the drinks, and they chatted about their lives and careers. Daniel eventually returned as the bar had last rounds, and by 2 p.m. the bar was closing, with the three men heading to the exit. As they reached the exit of the club, Mark asked,
"Hey man, what are you guys doing now?"
James replied.
"Probably not sure. Hang out at Daniel's."
Daniel lived not far away in Hollywood. After exchanging numbers, Mark handed James a flyer with demonic imagery and creepy demons and says to him,
"Check out this place. It's in the art district. A great vibe, and it's open till real late."
James and Daniel take the flyer and leave Mark and head off for some late night tacos. 15 minutes later, Mark rings James and after a few minutes of arm twisting convinces them to agree to meet him at the club. On their way to the art district, Daniel is not happy. He's not comfortable meeting up with a stranger.
"It's 2 in the morning.
He grumbles when they finally arrive.
The art district is not a friendly place at the best of times, but at 2 in the morning, it's eerie."
The club was even more frightening, a dark Gothic place with a long red painted staircase descending into a dark basement. Upon seeing this, Daniel refused to enter. After telling James he was leaving, he contacted Uber and arrived home safely a short time later. James, who was in wonderful spirits and not wanting the party to end, descended down the long red staircase. Meeting up with Mark, the two men had a few drinks and by 3 p.m. James told Mark he would be heading home. He had a long way to travel to Long Beach and he started fiddling with his phone in an attempt to book an Uber.
"Long Beach? I live out that way.
Mark tells James.
I'll give you a ride."
Feeling grateful at this fortunate situation and relieved that he just saved $200 on a cab, James agrees, even though there's a quiet, nagging feeling deep in his gut.
Something's not right. Something's off about this kid.
Traveling on the highway, James keeps checking the landmarks, ensuring they're still traveling in the right direction, when he noticed Mark getting a myriad of texts.
"Who's texting you?"
James inquired.
"Oh, it's these girls I know. They're at Joshua Tree. They want us to come out there and party with them. They say it's lit. I think I'm gonna head out there. Do you want to come
Now?
James asked incredulously.
Yes, now.
No.
Came the swift answer from James.
Oh, come on.
Mark teased, eventually convincing James to tag along. James agreed on one condition: he was home by Sunday afternoon. Mark assured him, pulled over, put coordinates in the GPS, swung the car around, and they headed to Joshua Tree. As they drove along, James started questioning this decision. He had only ever driven through Joshua Tree. It was hours from his home. They had no gear, no tents, or even water. Panic was slowly creeping in. After an hour and a half of driving, Mark turns to James and said,
Man, you are really trusting. How do you know I'm not taking you somewhere to kill you?
The question stunned James, who remained quiet for a while and then replied,
Well, how do you know I'm not planning on killing you?
to which Mark shrugged his shoulders and said,
That's fair.
and they drove on in silence. Reaching Joshua Tree, they turned on a dirt road, and the coordinates showed they had reached their destination. There was nothing around but a crossroads.
Are we, yeah?
James asked.
No,
Mark said,
I think it's this way.
and they carried along the dirt road. Mark turns to James once again and says,
Hey man, do you have any weapons or anything?
James asks nervously,
What do you mean? On me? Or do I own any?
Oh, both.
Mark replied.
Yeah, I own a couple of knives, but they are at home. I don't have anything with me now. Why?
He asked in terror. Mark never replied as they drove on silently, eventually coming upon a canyon. Hello, Mrs. Oya. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Nat and I'm coming to you from the beautiful shores of North Queensland, Australia, home of the Great Barrier Reef. That's not an Australian accent, you say? And you would be correct. I was born and raised in South Africa and immigrated to Australia about 15 years ago. If you enjoy this video, please click the like and subscribe button. And if you would like a free gift, down in the description box below is a link to our newsletter. Click on that link and we will send you this adorable Mrs. O puppy sticker. With all that out of the way, let's get on with the video. There are women called estries, mares or werewolves. They were created at twilight. They could perform a certain act and thereby change form. Rabbi Eli D., 1465, Sinman Ancient Jewish Text. The horse leech hath two daughters crying, Give, give. There are three things that are never satisfied, yea, four things, say not. It is enough. Proverbs 30:15. Today we're going to deal with an event that took place at the Joshua Tree in September 2022. This is in California, United States of America. In the description box below is the link to a fantastic YouTube channel where James actually tells his story in his own words. It is from the Confessionals podcast, one of my favorite channels on YouTube. So if you like this type of content, I would highly suggest that you subscribe to Tony's channel. We'll be going through this incident in detail. We'll also be doing some history, as you know how I love to do, and see if we can tie this all together. I feel at the beginning of this video, I need to just say that when Mark is describing the people at the canyon, he says they look Eastern European. They identify themselves as Jewish. As such, when I looked into this video, I looked into it from a Jewish point of view, and then it actually ties through, and you'll find it's actually fascinating how it marries back through to the Romanian Eastern European culture. Vampires, yes, vampires as old as biblical times. The weird Bible verse I quoted in the beginning is actually a very interesting chapter in Proverbs 30, and I encourage everyone to read it. But horseleech is translated back to Hebrew as aluka. Now, this is how you spell it, but I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I'm saying aluku. I don't care. It's a demon. Back to the story. It's a feminine word in Hebrew meaning leech with many teeth. And according to some Hebrew scholars, bloodthirsty monsters or vampires. Aluku is a descendant of Lilith, another malevolent demon known as the seducer and slayer of children demon god. She sounds wonderful. Anyway, who according to the Jewish Talmud was said to be the first wife of Adam and was banished from Eden for not obeying Adam. Some biblical scholars claim Lilith is the owl quoted in Isaiah 34. Lilith is mentioned in many other places in the Babylonian Talmud, and she's found in incantation bowls. Incantation bowls is a bowl believed to provide protective magic. The bowls are inscripted with Hebrew text and have a spiral beginning at the rim moving towards the center. Bowls are buried face down in order to capture the demons. In 1947, archaeologists found 2 bowls buried face down about 2 meters in a riverbed at the ancient city of Babylon. Although they have still not managed to decipher what all the text says in the bowls, they were very quickly able to make out the name of the demon Lilith. Now, why would anyone want to capture a demon, you may ask? Well, I ask, like I want. Well, don't do that. Don't do that. Like I'm going to say to Pepper right now, don't do that. Give me a sec. Don't do that. So again, why would anyone want to capture demons? Well, it can help with a number of things, including healing fevers, disease, guarding from sudden death. Don't try that at home. Not a good idea. So Aluku, or horseleech, as the Lord likes to call her, is a descendant of Lilith. The reason for the name is just like a leech, she's never able to satisfy her insatiable thirst for blood. She is known as the mother of vampires. The verse in Proverbs says, crying, give, 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 never being satisfied. Her lust for blood, brutality, and torture of human is indescribable, and she has a particular delight in the blood and pain of children. In Jewish texts, they explain that in the time of King Solomon, human beings who practiced witchcraft had the ability to transform to the Aluku. They would shapeshift into other animals. Wolves and bats were a particular favorite. And the only way you could terminate one was preventing them from drinking blood long enough, and then that managed to kill them. You had to bury them face down with their mouth filled with moist earth. Most, however, never had to suffer this terrible fate. With their insatiable thirst of blood that was never satisfied, they had another problem. They were infertile. However, being barren was not a problem because they could still make children of their own by drinking a human's blood, getting that human either voluntarily or with force, in some cases, to give them their blood. That way, turning them into an Aluka, but the Aluka that makes you is now your mother. In Jewish law, there's a female vampire known as Estries, and this vampire only preys on the blood of Hebrews. The plural for Estries is strigoi. Strigoi is the Romanian word referring to living dead creatures. Seems that our Jewish law is now intertwining with Romanian law. Remember this as we go into James' story. Strigoi are vampires that are made and not born, according to Romanian law. They are made in the traditional way you make vampires, and as with the ancient Jewish texts, Romanian law says you can be turned into a strigoi willingly or unwillingly. Strigois are incredibly strong, move at lightning speed, and only consume blood. It is said when they are still baby strigois, they are clumsy at first, awkward with their newfound speed, and extremely dangerous with the incredible strength they receive. A strigoi is an evil spirit, and it is said that they possess bats, wolves, and can appear as ghosts, ghouls, or zombies. We left the story as James and Mark were traveling on the dirt road towards the canyon. As they reached the canyon, James describes it as a downgraded music festival. He says there's RVs and there's tents strewn around with less than 100 people, including women and children running around. He then says they all have an appearance of Eastern Europeans. They meet up with the girls. Mark's been texting all morning, and James says there's an uncomfortable vibe in the air. He says it's not like a music festival or even a camping site. Everyone's a bit standoffish, not friendly at all. He brushes it off. It's early Saturday morning, and he follows Mark along as they mingle through the tents. At one of the tents, he stopped, and a group starts questioning on his religion and if he was Jewish, to which he replied, no, he was not. The group persisted, questioning him. We are all Jewish. If you're not Jewish, what do you believe? James was a bit caught off guard at this weird question from these strange people. Eventually answered and said he was not religious at all, but grew up Catholic, and his family was Catholic. When he said this, the group got visibly uncomfortable, quiet, and Mark shoved him away, and he was, what are you doing, man? Why are you freaking everyone out? James, confused, says, what are you talking about? They asked me a question. He says, well, don't be telling them any more stuff. I got very annoyed at how many red flags James had ignored. James, you have a slow inner voice for a reason. Use it. Let's go on. So it's about 11 a.m. in the morning, and James says he's tired, and he tells Mark he needs to go sleep. He gets in the car, wakes up at 2 p.m. It's the hot desert sun beating down in the car, and Mark says to him he's going down to the shop to get them some beers and snacks, giving him some money. He meets a friend of Mark's named Ollie, a strange man who has an inflatable mattress next to his car. And he asks James, where are you sleeping tonight? To which James says, oh, we'll probably just sleep in Mark's car. Ollie tells him, well, this inflatable mattress, this is for you to sleep in tonight. Odd, he thinks, odd. But James thanks him for the friendly gesture. It's like most friendliness he's had all day, so I get it. He's like, oh, thank you, so good, okay. As the day draws on, everyone is cooking, and James says again, the vibe just gets weirder and weirder. No one sharing much, not laughing, not chatting, and if you've been either to a music festival, I try to think if I have been. I'm sure I've been, yeah, I think I have been. But I've definitely been camping. Eventually he ends up on the inflatable mattress with a group of others, and they're having drinks and watching the sunset. The event organizer approaches James. He has a thick Eastern European accent, and he's wearing a Mad Hatter's hat. He snaps a bracelet on his wrist. You are VIP, turns around and does that to a few others in the camp. Alarmed and confused and at why he was chosen alone in the group that was on the inflatable mattress, he asks them, like, what is this about? The group vaguely responds, and they go, oh, you can go anywhere in the camp, and you can go into any RV, and you can have whatever you want. Whatever you see, you can just take. That's what it means. So he's again, that's weird. While they're still having this conversation, there's a girl laying next to James on the inflatable mattress, rolled up in a blanket, and she starts complaining and crying, and she says, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be here another night. I don't want to see what happens. I don't want it to get dark. I would have been out of there. I would have been gone. I would have walked out the desert. James had Crocs on. James, I don't want to judge you for your Crocs, okay? I know they're famous Australian shoes, so I'm not going to be mean. But in my Crocs, at that moment, I would have been gone. Done. Not our friend James. Oh, no. He waits till much later. Startled by her outburst, asks her, what do you mean? And she's ignoring him, and she tucks herself even more tightly under the blanket, repeating, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. The rest of the group ignore her, and they start speaking about the twins. The twins were, according to the group, an amazing international DJ group. So I tried to do a bit of research to see if I could see weird international twin DJs, and there were actually two sets. So I was like, oh, there's two weird looking DJ twins out there that are international. So I decided I didn't know which one it could be. All through the day, people had been speaking about the twins, and it was the only time James would see the mood shift a bit. Keen to meet them and cheer this moody group up, James was getting a bit excited, but something was still not sitting right in his gut. So he was cautious and he wasn't drinking too much because he just wasn't feeling this place. The twins rock up and James is confused by the weirdness around them. They get out the car, they ignore everybody, they just in their gear and they start putting it in the tent that's been set up ready for whatever the night's festivities are. At this part of the story, he decides to stop and he's speaking to Tony at the Confessionals podcast, and he says what he's about to say is unbelievable. He says it's hard to believe, and it's even hard for him to hear what he's saying. And to explain that he's never really had any paranormal experiences. The only thing he had as a child was sleep paralysis. And then he says, quote, it gets crazy. This is empirical to me. I know what I experienced and I know what happened. It really just feels like a nightmare, unquote. The sun had now set. The twins are playing in the tent and James goes into the porta potty. A few minutes later, he exits and he says the crowd is strained. I'm not sure if you can hear the wind howling out here, so this is a bit spooky. Let's get on with it. The sun is now set. The twins are playing in the tent and James goes to the porta potty. A few minutes later, he exits and the crowd has strangely doubled in size. This confuses him because during the day there weren't this many people there, and you would have noticed this many people coming in by car into the canyon. It's a flat place. Baffled by this, he shakes his head and walks off to the tent. Everyone is dressed in normal attire as he enters the tent and he meets up with Mark and another guy. As they dance in the tent, James says little children start running between their legs. And as they're dancing, it feels like they're going into a trance state. And these children seem to be weaving between their legs faster and faster. And eventually it looks like lightning just shooting between their legs. He shakes us off as weird and stops dancing to gather himself. When he looks around, everyone is in black except for Mark and the other guy that he came into the tent with. Totally confused, he turns and sees a woman about 6 feet away from him with yellow eyes and fangs feeding off the neck of someone else. Horrified and believing he was hallucinating, he looks away and he looks back, and this time he sees a small amount of blood on the other woman's neck. This is when you think James would run, right? This is the time. You'd be wrong. He grabs Mark and decides that they need to get out of the tent because this is getting too freaky. As they're walking out the tent, he sees two demons standing there as real as flesh and blood. He says they didn't have hands, describing them as mitten fingers, like something out of Hellraiser. He turns to Mark and he's like, what is going on here? What is going on here? Mark and his mate brush it off, tell him to chill. Everyone's having a good time. James reasons with himself and he's like, everything's good. They're not bothering me or trying to kill me. He hangs around the tent for another 10 minutes, but it's getting way crazier. And everyone except Mark and the guy that was with Mark start looking like vampires. At this stage, he's like, I need to get out of here. Mark walks him out and says, I think you need to get some rest. And walks him towards Ollie's truck. And Ollie's got a compartment in the back and they lead him to the truck. And there he sees there's a latch on the compartment, but the latch is on the outside. For some reason, he starts getting in and they leave him and they just walk away. But as they turn and walk away, he decides, well, I'm not getting in there because there's a latch in there and I don't know what's going on. Good move, Mark. Doesn't get in and he starts walking around. So he walks away from the truck, and when he walks away from the truck, he starts hearing voices in his head. At this point, he's convinced that he's been drugged, but he says he's having hallucinations with his eyes, and now he's hearing things, but he's not feeling tipsy. He's walking around the camp, and he sees Ollie tinkering with some lights on a car and the inflatable mattresses nearby. Walks up to him, and he says, hey, Ollie, can I talk to you? To which Ollie replies,
No, I'm really busy right now. I can't speak.
At this moment, a high-pitched screech starts coming out of the tent. The tent flies into the air, and it looks like a green portal opens up in the air, and people start flying up into the portal. Run. You would run, right? I'm 50. I would run in my Crocs, James. In my Crocs. If I had Crocs, I would run. Not James. Oh, no. Obviously freaking, he decides he's got to grab his phone and record this because this is unbelievable. He grabs his phone, and when he looks at his phone, it's glitching. It's stuck on the home screen. He can't swipe it. He can't move it. He can't do anything. The phone is just frozen and glitched. So he says he walks away, and he says he's trying to logically reason what he's just seen. I guess if you're not running like I'm going to be running, I'm with my Crocs, I'm running out of there. I guess if you stay, you're going to try and make a logical explanation for what you're seeing. So he figures he cannot be drugged because his phone would still work. He figures he cannot be drugged because when he looks at his phone, even now, he's looking and it's not working. And he's like, if I was drugged, my phone would still work. And then he remembers the VIP bracelet, right? And at this moment, you would go, yep, that's it. I'm a sacrifice. I'm running. Starts walking towards the RVs and the tents. There's a group of people looking like vampires sitting at a bonfire. And he sneaks past them and he starts quietly creeping into an RV. As he creeps into the RV, a woman with a thick Eastern European accent with yellow eyes in black biker attire says,
What are you doing by my trailer?
James trying to act cool and he's like, I'm just hanging out. She says then,
Do you know what evil is here?
to which he replies, no, it's all good. We're all having fun. The vampire lady then replies,
Do you realize what's going to happen to you?
His entire body's frozen in fear now. Hair's just raised up, backing away. When he looks to the tent that was popped up and everything was going on, that's no longer there. The people are no longer flying in the sky. He slowly begins backing away when one of the cloaked figures looks at James and points, and he describes them as a Harry Potter Dementor type of thing. James says he's never felt such palpable evil in his life. The humans in the crowd look and they just start laughing and pointing. And a girl comes up to him and offers him a beer. He takes the beer and he realizes he doesn't have a bottle opener. And he says to her, I don't have a bottle opener. She comes back, she opens it and she walks away. And he says he looks down and he looks at the beer and there's no label on the beer. So he then just quietly walks away and now he's not drinking the beer, obviously. Puts the beer down, when he's sure nobody's paying any attention to him, and he starts slowly making his way out of the perimeter of the camp. This is when he sees a giant spotlight just light up the camp, which there's no electricity. At Joshua Tree, the middle of the desert, there's nothing there. This is nothing going on. He says, so he starts walking into the night, and he says he's walked about 2 American football fields away. He sees 3 figures come up, 3 shadows, and he decides to rush past them, and one grabs them, and he says it's weird. It's as though he can feel them grab him, but there's no power behind it. You feel the force, but it's though there's no actual strength behind that force. But he was terrified, and they begin hissing at him, and he's so scared, and he's like, I don't know what to do. Obviously, what do you do? He remembers his Catholic upbringing, and he knows that they hate anything Catholic or Christian. He thinks of movies, so he begins to say, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. As the word ghost leaves his mouth, they shoot back, and he takes off running. He does about 50 yards, which is about 45 meters, and he describes it as though he's running into a force field. He says he looks down on the ground, and it's though the ground is stretched out like a cartoon. And this nightmare just won't end. He can't move now, and he doesn't know where these things are. So he begins calling out to his father, who's passed away a few years ago, begging him for help, screaming into the night, I don't want to be sacrificed, because he says at this moment he wasn't even scared of death. He said he had a fear in him at this moment that whatever came after death was way worse than death. So he was terrified, screaming, I don't want to die. I don't want to be sacrificed, screaming this into the night. His life starts flashing before his eyes. At this stage, he just stopped trying to fight the force field, and he felt hopeless. For some reason, he said he felt the need to say, I walk with Jesus. I walk with Jesus. As he continues to say this, he loosens from the force field. The ground goes back to normal. He takes off running. He runs another 2 football fields and slows down, tries to catch his breath when he hears whispering around him. He looks around, sees car lights starting to move at the camp, sees 3 freshly dug, unmarked graves. He starts running past them saying, I walk with Jesus. I walk with Jesus. Jesus guides me. When suddenly these black hands start coming out of the ground, grabbing at him, frightened, but he realizes they're just to scare him. They can't do anything. Carries on running, saying, Jesus guides me. I walk with Jesus. When he gets hit in the back of his head, lands face down on the ground, and these hands are grabbing at him. And he says this evil presence starts suffocating him. He's then lifted off, levitating. This voice starts saying the most wicked blasphemy you can imagine. He manages to do the sign of the cross and drops to the ground. Keeps on running, saying, Jesus walks with me, Jesus walks with me. He then runs into barbed wire, which he says it must have been divine intervention, because it should have cut him up, and it was neck level. He checked, he couldn't see any blood, he felt fine. And then he realized, he looked around, and he said there were trip wires at different heights all over, just all out through the desert. He carefully navigates the tripwire, realizing the cars from the campsite are getting closer to him. He slows down to catch his breath, and then he hears the whispers again. And as he's going slow, a triangle bursts in flame, and he manages to quickly jump out of that. In the far distance, he can see the lights of a town, and he finally gets to a road. Looks at his phone, and it's working. He rings some of his friends to let them know where he is. At this stage, he just wants people to know where he is, to look for him if he turns up dead. He walks towards the town, and he comes upon an industrial area and a factory. His phone is now dead, and he decides he might as well hide behind the factory. That's safer. because he starts seeing cars patrolling the streets. And as he goes around the corner, he sees an emergency room up the road. So he enters bruised and battered. The nurses obviously rush to help him as he tells them he's been chased by some people and he needs to charge his phone. They offer to phone the police. James refuses for them. They then say, we'll get a doctor because he's cut up and he's pretty scratched. He's been running through the desert. And he says, no, he doesn't need a doctor. All he needs is a phone. And they say, sure. They help him out. They'll get a phone. He calls an Uber and he pays $500 to be taken home to Long Beach. On the way, the Uber driver starts chatting to him, asks him how was his night. He was obviously not wanting to share too much with the Uber driver. Just said to him, he was at some festival in the canyon and things got weird and people started chasing him and he was lucky to get out because he thought that they were going to do serious harm, maybe even kill him. And then the Uber driver says to him, you're not the only one who's told me that horrific story. James eventually gets home and he says Mark only contacts him that Sunday afternoon, leaving a voicemail. And it's two people talking and it says, quote,
"Oh crap, he was saying a lot last night."
James ignored that. Mark then sends him a text saying, hey, how did you get home? Tells him, some buddies picked me up. 2 days later at 3 a.m. in the morning, Mark texts James again and says, tell me the truth. How did you get home? James never responds and he never hears from Mark again. Tell me what you think happened that night. Was Mark making it up? Was he drugged and on some sort of hallucinogenic? Or were there vampires at Joshua Tree? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like and subscribe. And don't forget our free gift down in the description box below. Link to our newsletter and we'll send you this adorable Mrs. O Puppy Investigate sticker. If you would like a biblical perspective, stick around for the next few minutes. If not, thank you so much for watching and we hope to see you soon. Even if the story is made up, there is a very important message in the story, and that is when James realized his own mortality. At the point of death, he wasn't afraid of death. He was more fearful of what comes after death. It was obviously also a cautionary tale of us not going to the desert with strangers, James, but he knows that. He knows that now. The Lord was also so kind and helpful to James, who does not say he's a believer. He only ever says he knew it annoyed them from the movies and that his family were Catholic. Jesus didn't care, didn't expect James to do some fancy repentance or some eloquent words to provide help. No, James called on him and he helped. He saved James that night. James knows he did, and I hope that James one day gives his life over to the Lord. I'll leave you with this verse, 2 Timothy 2:11-13. It is a faithful saying, for if we be dead with him, we shall also live with him. If we suffer, we shall also reign with him. If we deny him, he will also deny us. If we believe not, yet he abideth faithful. He cannot deny himself. If you call on the name of Jesus Christ, he will help you. He is always faithful, even when you're not, because he is faithful. His name is faithful. See you soon, my friends. Bye.